Yeah, so I'm Allyn Hunt. I'm here to talk to you about Destiny Vault Raider. Just a quick introduction. So, yeah, I started Destiny Vault Raider as kind of a hobby project. It started as just a learning experience to learn a little more about Python. I really like Destiny, obviously, so I thought it'd be interesting to try and create a couple of scripts that would, do some cool stuff. And it got out of hand, and I ended up with a full web app. Yeah, I'm working full time, and I'm a new father as well. So I probably could use about 20 hours extra a week to put into this, but it's a pretty good project. So I don't know, is anyone actually familiar with Destiny? Has anyone seen it before? Yeah, okay, a couple of people. So this is Destiny, and that guy, the closest guy in the red outfit is me, and that's a couple of my friends playing Destiny. So it's an online first-person shooter. It's developed by Bungie, so Bungie also did the Halo series, if you're familiar with Halo. It was a really kind of long-awaited kind of next step to Halo. Destiny 1 was released in 2014, in September 2014. Destiny 2 was just released about 6 weeks ago. And yeah, Destiny 1 had about 4 expansions, I think. And you can see it's got quite an active player population. So up until Destiny 2 was released, Destiny 1 still had about 1 million people per day playing it. And when Destiny 2 was released about a week ago, it had 5.5 million people per day playing it. And that's split between player versus player activities, so casual and competitive player versus player, periodic events like the Iron Banner, kind of once every month or once every 6 weeks, these kind of big events would come up. And then you'd have player versus enemies, so you'd have strikes. A strike would be it could be a random playlist with 3 players, whereas a raid is kind of a big activity. There'd be up to 6 players in a raid, so they take a lot of organising to get them up and going. The Destiny API, it's pretty cool. So there's a lot of stuff you can actually do with the API. The Destiny API itself is incredibly powerful. They've put a lot of work into it, and they've put a lot of stuff into it. So there's guys out there who work on the statistics side of things. So tracking the number of kills, your deaths, your assists, your precision kills, which is obviously very important in the competitive player versus player side of things. Then there's also some activity or milestone tracking, how long until I hit the next level or how long until I unlock this quest. And you can see here, so we can pull information from the Destiny API to kind of give us an idea of what we've just done or what we're going to do next. So this image here is one of the strikes I've completed, and the follow-up information to that would be, it'll give you the name of the strike. So it's called Sabaton Song. Description. So this activity was a strike, which means it was me and kind of 2 other random people. I killed 64 people. I got killed 5 times, which is pretty kind of low effort on my part. And it took me 22 minutes. So this again is information I've pulled out of the API, just to give an example of the kind of stats side of things. But I don't really talk about that, and I'm not very familiar with that side of it. So there's some other cool stuff that Destiny allow you to do. So Destiny allow you to, or I should say Bungie allow you to interact with the Destiny world. So you can view your items, you can transfer items from one character to another, you can equip items on your character, and that's kind of what I'm going to talk about here on this side of the presentation. You can also, vendors are selling special gear with special perks and armors. So one of the earlier projects I'd worked on that kind of got me started on this was I had kind of an email system that every week an exotic vendor would come and he'd sell some really kind of exotic gear. So I had a Python script that would send me a HTML formatted email. So this is obviously kind of critical stuff if you're playing competitive gaming and one week someone gets an advantage over you. It's, you kind of need to be aware of these kind of situations where you're not going to be getting the best weapons, so therefore you might be at a disadvantage competitively. Yeah, so I'm going to talk more about the inventory management side of things, but the inventory management solves a real problem. So as I was saying, if you're doing a raid, there's 6 people in a raid, so it's probably 5 random people. They may or may not know them. These things take a lot of time to get organized. So let's say you're doing a big raid and everyone kind of flies into the activity and you're standing around and you say, oh, actually, hang on, I don't have the right weapons for this, or I don't have the right armor for this. So kind of here's what you used to have to do before the API was opened up. So you fly in, you realize, okay, I don't have the right gear, so you have to change character. Your character then has to fly back to the tower, which is the social space. You have to take that weapon, you have to put it in the vault that's shared between all your other characters. Then you have to change character again. you have to fly back to the tower, you have to take that weapon out of the vault, and then you have to fly back to the activity where all your friends are. So while all this is going on, they've been sitting there waiting for you, and this can take up to 5 minutes. And basically every one of these steps, except for depositing and collecting the weapon, is a loading screen. So no one wants to be sitting there for 5 minutes behind loading screens. So, and the inventory management aspect of the API solves this quite well. And before I kind of get into it, the Destiny manifest is quite an important part of the actual of the Destiny API itself, and in some respects it's probably the biggest barrier for people who are trying to get involved with Destiny. So it's an SQLite based lookup table, and it contains definitions for all of your items. So let's give an example of your items. It'll have the item name, the item tier type, the description of the item, an icon, a screenshot of the icon. It'll also give descriptions of the activities. So for example, the example I gave you there was a strike called Sabaton's Song, and it gives you a screenshot of the strike. But it can be quite daunting for people starting off to try and get their head around this manifest. But from our perspective here, it's just going to be a lookup table, because I've handled all the downloading and parsing myself. Yeah, so the structure of the app, it's built in Python 2.7, and it's largely built from Miguel Grinberg's blog and his examples. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Flask, but Miguel Grinberg has done a great job in documenting a lot of this stuff, and he has a great book out there. He's actually releasing another version of the book, I think before Christmas as well, so a more up-to-date version. So it uses Flask with Python 2. Flask login for session management, so that handles the login, logout, and remember me tasks, which can be quite painful to do. Flask script manager, SQLAlchemy is used in the development side of things, but Postgres is used in deployed environments. That's Heroku. Yeah, and the Flask blueprints were pretty good for separating the main app from the API, and it was kind of necessary to develop an API down the line, which I wasn't expecting to do, but thanks to the examples from Miguel, it was pretty painless to do it. And the Jinja 2 HTML template for Python, which is still a bit tricky because it's not that well documented, so it can catch a lot of people out. So the hardest part of talking about Destiny Vault Raider is, if you haven't played Destiny before, you don't have an account, so you can't actually see what it is. So I've taken a screenshot here, and so you can see, as I said, I've been documenting the process of building it, so kind of each kind of view would have like a corresponding blog post on how I've built this page. So you can see in the introduction section there's links to related blog posts. It gives you basic character information, so just kind of this aspect here is your basic character information. So when you log in, it returns character information, and then it has all your gear, your subclasses, and also it has kind of a login, logout function. But it also, I've had to recently, with the release of Destiny 2, which was just released 6 weeks ago, I've had to create a user interface that would allow you to change accounts. So there's a lot of people now that, if you've ever played, let's say, Destiny 1 on PlayStation 1, or PlayStation PS4, and then you've bought it on Destiny 2, so you've doubled the amount of accounts. Well, Destiny players are pretty hardcore, so they generally don't play it on just one console. They'd have played it on Xbox, PlayStation, and then they normally would have played, well, let's just say they've played Destiny 1 on Xbox and PlayStation. When Destiny 2 came out, it automatically ported those accounts across. So instead of having 2 accounts, they now have 4 accounts. And with PC coming as well, that means that they'll now have potentially up to 6 accounts, 3 characters on each account. So there's a lot of kind of managing there that needs to go on behind the scenes. And that caught me by surprise, because Bungie have changed the way the login works as well with Destiny 2. And again, here's an example of the character's vault. So this is a vault where items are shared between each character. So remember, you no longer have to fly into a social space and deposit weapons in there and to take them out. You just have access to it here straight away. And yeah, so we can select characters by clicking on any of these items in game. It'll automatically transfer that item to your character, and you can change. So with the character select up there, you can change which character you want the item to go to, and yeah, and it'll bring you to that character's view then, so you can actually equip it on the character or do whatever you want with it. And I'll run through a video example of this later on, because it makes sense once you see it actually working. So yeah, and a couple of the other app features. So it now fully supports Destiny 2, so that was was released, what, 6 weeks ago, so the release of Destiny 2 really didn't help me prepare for the PyCon at all, because it was such a struggle to actually get the app operational again. Bungie have changed basically everything about the API endpoints that I use. They've changed the authentication flow, and they've even actually changed the Destiny 1 authentication flows as well, so I've had to retrospectively go back and fix the Destiny 1 side of things. Yeah, and with that as well, because of the changes, the kind of server costs are kind of prohibiting me from supporting both Destiny 1 and Destiny 2, so I've had to make the decision to just support Destiny 2 right now. But all that code is there if I want to enable both of them. And yeah, and it's probably worth noting here again that Bungie have just released the API, so some of the API endpoints haven't been fully supported yet. So for example, yeah, the vendor data, which is quite important, that's not been enabled yet for Destiny 2. Some are comparing the missions and activities between your clan members. That's there, it's ready, but it's just not enabled because Bungie haven't made those endpoints active yet. Yeah, and so basically I'm going to talk to you about kind of transferring items, equipping items, and there's a lot of other stuff that you'll probably have, if you're interested, you might have questions about, but there are kind of blog posts that go along with them. So kind of creating the Flask setup, the API quick start, downloading and formatting the manifest I touched on. That's kind of really important if you're interested in this thing. And I had a lot of background jobs running with Celery and Redis. If you're interested in that, you can give me a shout. Yeah, so I think the main aspect here, so we're going to get into it and see how we do it. I'm not really going to touch on the authentication flow, because that in itself is a full presentation. But the main thing about this is Python requests was unbelievably helpful in getting this set up. So from this, you can see here that if I want to create an authorized session, all I have to do is create a session object in requests, add the Bungie API key, which you get when you register, and then you add your authorization headers, which you get from the authorization flow. And that should return back some basic account information as well, like your character ID. It'll give you a list of all the characters. It'll give you your Destiny membership ID, which platform you're playing on, etc. So I know this is an eye chart, and the point here is I don't want you to read kind of every line of code, but this is basically the kind of flow that you take when you're populating the Vault view. So instead of the user loading into the social space and actually physically walking to the Vault, this is kind of how I've got around that. And why is it such a complex flow? Well, the first part of it returns, the first response from Bungie returns about 35,000 lines of text. A lot of that we don't really need. The second part, when you go to the manifest and you take out the information you want, returns 54,000 lines of text. You only really need about 2,600 lines of text to actually populate the full manifest. But you know, if you wanted, you can add more or less lines to that. Okay. Yeah, and again, this is more kind of talking about the requests. The Python request was so easy to get this started with. It allows you to do a lot of really cool stuff, like printing the URL, printing the status code, taking session headers and updating the session headers and updating cookie information. So if we send a request to Bungie, this is recently changed now in Destiny 2, but if we want to request the user's Vault data, this is how we do it. So you can see the top line. It's a bit of an eye chart, but on the very kind of top right there it says components equals, it's a query string parameter that says component 100 returns basic user account information. It's not that important, but when we say components equals 102, that returns the information for the user's Vault. So all of the user's Vault information is then added to the response you get from the API. And so the response itself isn't very helpful because it's, you know, there's a lot of information in there, but realistically for what we want, you know, if your character has a gun in the Vault, it doesn't actually give you the gun's name, it gives you the hash, the item hash of the gun. And you don't necessarily want that. So that means you have to kind of, you take that response, you look through it and you parse out all the item hashes. And a good thing to point out here as well is when we send the request, we receive this response from Bungie. The Python request library allows us to check the error status, which has caught me a couple of times because when Bungie changed the authentication flow, they didn't necessarily, you know, sometimes they return active accounts, but they're not the account you're looking for, so you need to have some error checking there to make sure you're actually checking the right account. So that user, again, could have up to 6 accounts. Yeah, so as I said, we take the item hash from the Bungie response, and we feed that into the manifest, and the manifest is just a lookup table, and that will return back a Python dictionary basically with all of the information for that item. But there's a lot of information there we don't really need, so we're just going to parse through that and take out some useful information. And I think I actually have it on the next file, so yeah, so we basically create a dictionary here with the useful information, so like the item name, the item icon, how many of the items we have, so if it was a consumable or if it was kind of currency or something like that, you need to know how many items there were. And from that then we send it to the Flask root, and so we create a Python dictionary of the useful item data, and then we send that into the Flask root, and that goes to the Ginger 2 template builder. And we also send it this, which is basically a list of categories. So obviously if it's a JSON response, everything's kind of muddled around, so we need to categorize it again. So your kind of main weapon would be a kinetic weapon. So, and again, here's the data that we're actually keeping from it. So we have the name of the weapon, which is Meet a Multi-Tool. The type of weapon, it's a scout rifle. It's a kinetic weapon, and that's essentially what we're looking for. So we want to bucket all of these items together and keep all our kinetic weapons together, all our armor together, all our gauntlets together, any kind of consumables, we want to display those together. And again, and this from the Ginger templating side of things, this is how that's handled here. So essentially all we need to do here is we loop through every item in the category, and then for every item in the weapon list, we just compare them to see, are these the same items? So for every kinetic weapon, is the item we're currently looking at a kinetic weapon? If it is, then we'll include that information in the item block. And yeah, so the code in item block.html is repeated for every item that we want to display. And here's what the item block actually looks like. So I've tried to strip out as much of the unnecessary information, but this is basically just raw HTML. But you can see we're just taking the dictionary items and we're putting in the icon, we're putting in the item name, and the power level and the tier type. So once you actually loop through all of your kinetic weapons, this is kind of what you're given. So it's not the prettiest, because the whole point of this was to make kind of a simple web application that I could document as well. So I'm not using any kind of front-end wrappers. It's all basically Python and HTML and CSS. I am looking into fixing that though. Also, there's a huge amount of information in the manifest, and one of the real challenges here is how to take all of that information and display it and make it look like the user interface isn't too cluttered. Yeah, okay, so right now we have our vault view, so the user can log into the website and actually view their vault, but that by itself isn't too helpful, because there's no point actually looking at what's in your vault if you can't actually access it. So luckily for us, Bungie have implemented the transferitem endpoint, and basically this is it's a post. It takes a post request and it takes some data from us, which will allow us to transfer our item from the character to the vault, or from the vault to any one of our characters. So the item has to go through the vault, but once it goes through the vault, you can transfer from character to character, and you can do a lot of cool stuff. So it's a post test, and it just takes a payload. The payload is essentially a unique reference number, so think of it as kind of like a barcode for that particular weapon. Is it going to or from the vault? Generic item ID, so that's it takes a generic item hash. So the item hash is actually different than the reference number, because you can have multiple items, so the reference number kind of is specific to that one item. It takes the character ID, which you're sending the character. So let's say if you have a hunter and a warlock, you're actually sending it to your warlock instead of your hunter. And your account details would be, are you sending it to your PlayStation account or your Xbox account? Yeah, so essentially you can see here the attribute tag essentially just wraps around the tag we've seen previously in the vault view. So from the user's perspective, once they hover their mouse over the item, if they click on that, it activates this endpoint, and you can see it'll take you back to it's a bit difficult to read here, but this is the information we're actually passing into it, and it'll take you back to the view that we think the user wants to go to. So once the user is looking at their vault, the transfer from their vault, it'll take them to the character view, and it'll show you what weapons are actually on that character. And here's how that's actually done in Flask. So this is the transfer item route, and you can see here on the top we have all the item parameters that the user wants or we need in order to transfer the item, and we're actually populating them into the post data. And once we populate them into the post data, we don't actually display anything in this route. We immediately redirect the user back to the route where they want to go. So yeah, there's nothing there kind of too crazy. It's literally just kind of a post request, an authorized post request. And this is what the character view looks like. So the previous section was the vault view, and here's the character view. So these are the actual weapons the user is carrying on them right now. So you can see the weapon on the left, the kind of purple weapon on the left, is the weapon that's actually equipped. So you can think of that as being the weapon that's actually in the character's hands right now, but you have the option of changing those weapons. Or you have the option of sending, you don't really want to use that weapon right now, you can send it back to the user's vault. So let's have a look at the API in action here. It's kind of hard to demonstrate this without a video, so if you bear with me here, we've a video. I think the colors are slightly off on this as well. So I'm in the vault view here, and I'm scrolling through the vault, and there's a helmet here I want to put on my character. You can see I've transferred the helmet to my character, and I'm back to the character view, so now I can equip that helmet on my character. So if you look at my character here, his helmet will change, and then it'll take me back to the character view. So I'm getting ready for some player versus player here, so I go back to the vault, and I pick out my favorite gun, which is the medium multi-tool. I transfer that to my character. I scroll down, and you can see the gun on my back has just changed, because I've equipped the medium multi-tool. And again, if you're doing any player versus player stuff, it's a lot of fun if you use a sword. So I'm going to transfer my sword across. Sword is transferred across. I'll equip the sword, but because I've already got my medium multi-tool on my back equipped, it doesn't actually show you any feedback there, but it is actually equipping it. Yeah, so that's essentially the core of the app. So that's the inventory management side of things. There are a couple of other items there. There's kind of some social stuff, how you can connect up with your clan members. It gives you a list of all your clan members. I'm working on having a system in place where you can actually compare your clan's activities with yours. So let's say if there's a guy you like playing with, you can click on his name, it'll give you a list of all the missions that he's working on. Deploying this was very challenging, especially with Destiny 2, the release was just around the corner. So there's a list of kind of items here. Like one thing, Destiny, they used to return your last used account, so it was always pretty clear that you'd always take the last used account and you'd kind of do all your actions with that. But now with double the amount of accounts, they return them in numerical order. So they always return the Xbox account first. So for example, some guys I know have tried the beta out on their Xbox, but they've never actually played Destiny on the Xbox. Well, that doesn't matter. Bungie have created an account for them. And that only becomes apparent when you're actually trying to transfer the items, or you're trying to get the items from their vault, because you are using accurate account information. It's just not the account that they're looking for. And there's no way of telling that until the user actually gets into the user interface and checks it out. Yeah, and as I've touched on, the manifest has been extremely tricky to work with. I've automated a lot of that in the back end, but once I pushed all that automation to Heroku were looking for €60 a month to actually to support that. So as one salary worker, one Redis database added up to $50 a month, and I was already paying $10 a month for the hobby plan, so that wasn't working. So right now I'm kind of still struggling with manually updating the manifest. And again, actually just one piece there. You know, there's a lot of other apps like this out there, so if a user comes to your app and they try and use your app and then it doesn't work for them, their account information isn't correct, it's not necessarily your fault. You have to kind of fix these things in deployment. And the user, they're not too likely to come back to your account, so you can see kind of a big uptick immediately, and then a kind of real trough where people have actually checked out your account but said, that doesn't work as well as some of these other ones, so they're less likely to come back. And that was a bit of a whirlwind. Conclusions: the app itself works well. Flask was great, and it was very important to actually get started with Flask, because it really did help me out a lot, especially Miguel's tutorials. Right now there's a lot of stuff I can do. There's a lot of redundant API calls I'm looking to clean up. I should really be caching the inventory items in between requests, and I'm going to look into how that can be done at the front end with Ajax. there's a lot of stuff that really needs to be done on the front end, cleaning up the Vault view and adding more information without making it too cluttered. But that's kind of outside the scope of that. That's not necessarily Python. And I'm definitely looking at moving hosting services because Heroku was they're pretty brutal with their pricing. They're very easy to get up and started, but their pricing is very extreme. Okay, so that was a quick view of Destiny Vault Builder. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer if we have time.
Afraid we're out of time.
I'm
sure Alan
I'll stand around for a few minutes anyway.
Chat afterwards.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool, thank you, Alan.
Yeah, thanks very much.